The scent of jasmine tea and simmering ginger filled Li Mei's small kitchen, a comforting fragrance that had clung to the walls of her home for decades. But even the familiar aroma couldn't quite mask the quiet hum of emptiness that resonated within the old house, an echo of a life interrupted. Every evening, as dusk brushed the sky with hues of bruised plum and lavender, Li Mei began her ritual. She'd meticulously set the dining table, a heavy oak piece that had been her grandmother's for two. 2 placemats, 2 sets of chopsticks, 2 porcelain bowls, 2 teacups. Then, with a practiced slowness, she'd draw a single chair, tucked neatly under the table, away from its companions. This chair, the one closest to the window, remained empty, untouched, waiting. It was Tian's chair, her son's. Tian had been 5 years old when he vanished from a crowded park, a blur of bright yellow rain boots, and a giggle swallowed by the wind. That was 12 years ago. 12 years of unanswered questions, of hollow investigations, of a mother's heart slowly calcifying around a core of stubborn, unyielding hope. The empty chair was Li Mei's anchor, her daily affirmation that Tian wasn't gone, merely elsewhere. She spoke to him sometimes, quiet murmurs while stirring soup or folding laundry. "Your favorite green beans tonight, Tian," she'd whisper, even though she ate alone. "Did you see the full moon, my boy? So bright." Her neighbors, kind elderly Mrs. Chun and Mr. Li, often offered sympathetic glances and warm bowls of congee. They knew about the chair, of course. Everyone in their small, tightly knit community knew. They admired Li Mei's resilience, even as they worried about her clinging to a ghost. "Li Mei, my dear," Mrs. Chun had said one afternoon, her voice soft as velvet. "Life, it moves forward, even when we don't want it to." Li Mei had simply smiled, a fragile thing that didn't quite reach her eyes. "And so it does, Mrs. Chun. But some things, some loves, they remain fixed." The years, however, did not remain fixed. They blurred, each day a repetition of the last, until Li Mei felt like a moth caught in amber, perfectly preserved in her grief. Tian would be 17 now, a young man on the cusp of adulthood. The thought brought a sharp pang, a vision of a tall, bright-eyed boy who existed only in her imagination. One dreary Tuesday, while volunteering at the local community center, a flyer caught Li Mei's eye. "Open your heart, open your home. Consider becoming a foster parent." She looked at the smiling, diverse faces on the brochure, young people who needed a place to belong. A strange, unfamiliar warmth bloomed in her chest, quickly followed by a chill of guilt. How could she? How could she even think of bringing another child into Tian's house? It felt like a betrayal, but the seed was planted. It burrowed deep into her thoughts, gnawing at the edges of her daily routine. The quiet of her house began to feel less like a sanctuary and more like a tomb. Mrs. Chen's words echoed. Life moves forward. Maybe, just maybe, she could too. The adoption agency was a bright, airy place, filled with the enthusiastic chatter of social workers and the rustle of paperwork. Li Mei felt a profound sense of awkwardness, a feeling she hadn't known in years. She wasn't used to expressing her needs, her hopes, her fears to strangers. Amanda, her social worker, was a kind, empathetic woman with warm eyes and a gentle smile. She listened patiently as Li Mei stumbled through her story, glossing over Tian's disappearance, focusing instead on her desire to give a child a stable, loving home. "It's a big step, Li Mei," Amanda had said, her voice reassuring. "And a wonderful one. There are so many children who would thrive with someone like you." Li Mei met several children, each encounter a delicate dance of hope and hesitation. She saw their smiles, their shyness, their guardedness. But something always held her back, until she saw Vincent. Vincent wasn't a child. He was 15, tall and lean, with a mop of dark hair that constantly fell into his eyes. He sat slumped in a chair, a book in his lap, his gaze fixed somewhere beyond the window, his expression a careful blank. He looked like a storm cloud, brooding and distant. Li Mei felt an unexpected pull. Perhaps it was his quietness, so akin to her own. Perhaps it was the subtle tremor in his hands when he turned a page, betraying a vulnerability he fought hard to conceal. Their first meeting was a test of wills. Vincent answered in monosyllables, avoiding eye contact. Li Mei, usually so reserved, found herself talking more than usual, asking questions about his interests, his favorite subjects, anything to pierce the wall he'd built around himself. He loved graphic novels, she discovered, and had a surprisingly deep knowledge of astronomy. "You like the stars?" she'd asked, surprised. He finally looked at her, a flicker of something in his dark eyes. "They're constant," he'd said, his voice a low rumble. "Always there. No matter what." Li Mei understood. He saw in the stars what she saw in Tian's empty chair. A promise of constancy in a chaotic world. Over the next few weeks, Li Mei visited Vincent at the group home. Gradually, painstakingly, the wall around him began to chip away. He started to ask her questions, small ones at first. "Do you have a garden? What's your favorite tea?" He learned about her jasmine plant, her love for baking, her meticulously organized life. He never asked about the empty chair in her dining room, though she knew intuitively that he would eventually notice it. The day Vincent moved into Li Mei's house was a strange mix of joy and trepidation. His few possessions, a worn backpack, a box of books, a beaten-up skateboard, seemed to fill the house with an unexpected energy, a youthful hum that had been absent for too long. Li Mei showed him his room, a small space overlooking the backyard, which she had painted a calm shade of gray and furnished simply. Vincent walked in, placed his backpack on the floor, and looked around with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. "It's good," he said, and for Vincent that was high praise. The evening of their first dinner together was fraught with unspoken tension. Li Mei, as always, set the table for two, plus Tian's empty chair. She watched surreptitiously as Vincent entered the dining room. His eyes, sharp and perceptive, went straight to the empty seat. He paused, a barely perceptible hesitation, before taking his assigned seat directly opposite Li Mei. He didn't ask. He simply observed. Li Mei felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. She wanted to explain, but the words caught in her throat. How do you explain 12 years of grief and unwavering hope to a boy who has likely known his own share of loss? They ate in silence, the clinking of chopsticks against porcelain the only sound. Vincent ate steadily, his gaze often drifting to the empty chair. Li Mei could feel the weight of his curiosity, a silent question hanging in the air. Life with Vincent was a series of adjustments. He was quiet, but his presence was undeniable. He helped with chores without being asked, often disappearing into his room with a book. Sometimes, Li Mei would find him in the backyard, meticulously tending to her jasmine plant, his brow furrowed in concentration. One afternoon, Li Mei found him in the kitchen, staring at the empty chair. He finally spoke, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Who does that belong to?" he asked, not looking at her. Li Mei's heart hammered. This was it, the moment she'd both dreaded and longed for. She took a deep breath. "That," she began, her voice a little shaky. "That was for my son, Tian." Vincent turned, his expression unreadable. "Was?" Li Mei nodded, her eyes misting. He disappeared when he was 5. A long time ago." She told him the story then, the bare facts of that terrible day, the endless search, the unyielding hope. Her voice grew stronger as she spoke, the words, once so painful to utter, now flowing with a quiet acceptance. Vincent listened, his gaze fixed on her face. When she finished, there was a long silence. Then he spoke, his voice unusually soft. I know what it's like to feel lost. To not know where you belong." He didn't elaborate, but Li Mei understood. He was sharing his own pain, his own feeling of being adrift, cast away. A fragile thread of understanding stretched between them, woven from shared sorrow. It was a moment of profound connection, a quiet acknowledgement of their individual burdens. Later that week, Amanda came for a check-in visit. As Li Mei poured her tea, Amanda's gaze landed on the empty chair. She didn't comment, but her expression was one of gentle concern. After Li Mei had recounted her week with Vincent, Amanda finally spoke. "Li Mei," she began, her voice kind. "Vincent is settling in beautifully. He's starting to open up. He cares about you, I can see it. But, have you considered what the empty chair means to him?" Li Mei felt a blush creep up her neck. "It's how I remember Tian. And that's important," Amanda agreed. "But Tian isn't at the table anymore, is he?" "Vincent is. And when he sees that empty chair, he sees a space that isn't his. A space that's waiting for someone else. It might make him feel like he's not truly home, not truly accepted." The words struck Li Mei with the force of a revelation. She had been so caught in her own grief, her own way of remembering, that she hadn't considered the impact on Vincent. The chair, her symbol of enduring love, had become a barrier, a silent message that he was secondary, a placeholder. That night, Li Mei sat in the quiet of her living room, staring at the empty chair in the dining room. It felt like an extension of her own heart, a raw wound. To move it felt akin to erasing Tian, to acknowledging a finality she couldn't bear. But Amanda's words and Vincent's silent, watchful presence resonated deep within her. Tian would want her to be happy, to live fully, to embrace new love. He would want her to share her home, her heart. The next evening, as the first stars began to prick the deepening twilight, Li Mei went to the dining room. Vincent was already there, meticulously wiping down the table. He paused, watching her. Li Mei walked directly to Tian's chair. She ran a hand over its smooth oak back, a silent farewell, a whispered promise that he would always be in her heart. Then she looked at Vincent. "Vincent," she said, her voice clear, "would you help me with something?" He nodded, his eyes curious. Together, they carefully lifted the chair. It was surprisingly heavy, weighted not just by wood, but by years of unspoken sorrow, of suspended hope. They carried it to the small alcove by the living room window, a space bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. Li Mei placed a small, cherished photograph of Tian, a happy toddler chasing butterflies, on the windowsill above it. "This way," she explained, her voice thick with emotion. "He can still see the stars. And we'll always know he's with us, watching over us." Vincent looked at the picture, then at the empty space at the dining table. A small, almost imperceptible nod. When Li Mei set the table that night, there were only 2 placemats, 2 sets of chopsticks, 2 porcelain bowls, 2 teacups. The space where Tian's chair had been was now open, inviting. As they sat down, a comfortable silence unfolded, different from the heavy quiet that had once filled the room. This was a silence of peace, of burgeoning comfort. Li Mei looked at Vincent, truly looked at him. His shoulders were less hunched, his gaze less guarded. He was still quiet, but there was a warmth in his eyes she hadn't seen before. "Do you like stewed pork with preserved vegetables?" Li Mei asked, a small smile playing on her lips. "It's Tian's other favorite, but I think you might like it too." Vincent took a bite, then another. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face, lighting up his dark eyes. "It's good, Li Mei," he said, his voice soft, full of a surprising gratitude. "It's very good." Li Mei felt a warmth bloom in her chest, a different kind of warmth than the one she'd felt for Tian, but just as real, just as precious. It was the warmth of a new beginning, of a heart expanding rather than replacing. The table wasn't empty anymore. It was full of quiet understanding, of shared meals, of new hope. And for the first time in a very long time, Li Mei felt truly, completely home. That will be all for today. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button. Goodbye.